Hi guys, I'm Steve Powell, PTA Global faculty. I'm very fortunate today to be with James Earls, teacher of anatomy trainers. Good friend of Thomas Myers, and I've been very fortunate to spend a couple of days with James going through different applications of the myofascial lines. So a big part of PTA Global's education is obviously identifying Thomas Myers anatomy trains and how the myofascial lines apply to movement. So something that was really exciting to me was when we were talking about the lateral lines specifically, was how you were able to then look at that as a structure, but then say, well, what happens when we put that into movement? So what I'd like to do first is just for James, just to kind of run us through a very short where it starts at the lateral line.
The lateral line begins with the two peroneal or fibulari muscles, so both longus and brevis. They wrap around the lateral malleolus. Longus brings us up to the head of the fibula, and then we can carry on into the iliotibial band. The antiband then kind of fans out at the top of the hip, tensor fascial out at the front. We can include a little bit of medius, but kind of more fascial way continuous would be gluteus maximus, take that kind of fanning out. And then above the iliac crest, we go into a series of X's with the external and internal obliques, brings up into the ribs, and then we carry on smaller series of X's right away along the ribcage with the intercostals. And then this one's book, we officially finish with the final X of sternocleidomastoid, and then the splenius capitis and splenius cervix coming up from the front. Excellent. One of the things we really look at it in terms of is frontal plane stability.
Of course. So we're kind of thinking in terms of initial global movement, something that involves sort of a frontal plane.
Anything going into lateral flexion.
Yeah.
So being able also just standing on one leg.
Excellent. And to then take that a step further and then say, well, we use the reference of walking, how, because of what happens when we bring in gravity in the ground, how the forces essentially allow the lateral line to become a little bit cleverer than what we might first think. So could you kind of give us an example of what we were discussing before?
Yeah, so often the way in which we describe these hip abductors is there's a strong correlation between them and the deltoid at the shoulder.
Yes.
So sometimes it can be more useful to think of them as a deltoid. So as we heel strike, I really have to resist both hip flexion as well as the adduction. So really a lot of the force for this frontal plane stability has to be combined with the sagittal plane. So the gluteus maximus at the back of that deltoid is going to need to be working that a little bit harder. And then as I come through into radius septimus, that line of force gradually will just change from gluteus maximus, a little bit more of medius for kind of pure frontal plane stability. And then as I progress towards toe off, then it comes in front. So I use the greater trochanter, kind of in anatomy terms, we call it a switch.
Yeah.
So that it's taking those lines of force in slightly different angles, working its way from the posterior to the middle, eventually to the anterior aspect of the anterior deltoid or the anterior tensor fascial lata. So involved with frontal plane stability, but also involved a lot with flexion and extension.
Brilliant, excellent. Thanks for that, James. Now, the reason I wanted to share that was because, yes, it's important for us to look at the lateral line as an example. We can look at movements that create that. But what really helps to take that a step further, which is what we've just done, is to then say, well, what happens when we put in gravity, ground reaction force, into gait or walking, which is obviously a very common activity, and how we start to understand another layer of the effectiveness of the body's ability to receive force, transmit it effectively, in order, in this case, to provide effective locomotion. Hope that was useful. James, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. And hope that's helpful.